We're going to start right off. Welcome. Thank you for joining us for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, and also for joining us the Seneca Park Zoo's Earth Day to You programming today. And it is brought to you once again by Diamond Packaging. So Diamond Packaging is a global industry leader specializing in developing innovative and sustainable packaging solutions. For years, they've been helping us with Earth Day and have been a sponsor of ours, donating trees and native pollinator seeds to guests that come to the zoo for a couple years now. And it's our pleasure to bring them back to sponsor us once again for Earth Day. So thank you, Diamond Packaging, for sponsoring us. And again, trees are gone, our trees are out, but we do still have some sustainability baskets. So please visit our website, senecaparkzoo.org/earth, for those pretty unique baskets that you can grab for touchless pickup this Sunday. We will give them to you then. So today, what will we be learning? Well, we'll be learning about a research project that the zoo has been undertaking and has taken a part in. And we've talked about it for about 1.5 years now. And we'll be sharing, introducing you to the program or updating you on the program as to how it sits right now and what we've been up to for the past 1.5 years. And the program is called the Urban Wildlife Information Network. Oh, yes. My name is Dave Will from the Seneca Park Zoo. Sorry, I've done a couple of these today. I can't remember what I've said and haven't yet. I am a lead naturalist for citizen science here at the zoo. And my pleasure at work is to run certain programs like this. So I get the pleasure of going out and putting up all of these cameras and then interpreting the data on the back end. So this program, this network is real great. And we're going to actually be getting to a presentation that we've created for the program. Do know that at the end of our presentation, we'll be looking at some live photos, not live photos, but some photos that we've taken recently. And then you'll have a chance to ID one of our tougher photos at the end to see how well you would do as a wildlife ecologist. So if we start the presentation, we're trying out something new that we'll be rolling out to schools using programming for distance learning, especially currently, but then also moving forward in the future. This is a great tool that we'll be using this presentation method. So first up, we have our network. So this network is a collection of 28 different cities or organizations in 25 cities around the United States and Canada. As you can see, we've pretty populated through the Midwest and the West Coast. We are some of the most northern east city involved and one of the only zoos involved with this network. And you can see we try to span as much of the network or the country as we can. And it all started in the Lincoln Park Zoo's Urban Wildlife Institute. So Lincoln Park Zoo is a wonderful institution, a great AZA network that is a partner of ours and helps us with this program. And what they've done is they've created a network where they've asked other cities to put up wildlife cameras all throughout their cities and map out certain wildlife movements and activities through the cities and then compare all of that data across the whole country and the network. So we see some animals real close to urbanization, and that's how this all started, was Chicago noticing that there was lots of coyotes actually going through the inner city of Chicago. So then they started putting up wildlife cameras to see where they were going and then found an incredible amount of wildlife located in a very urban area. So we have some photos here from the network that we've shared. And then our connection to the network has been pretty interesting. We hooked up with the Lincoln Park Zoo. Again, we're both accredited institutions through the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So we got talking to programs that we were up to, and we decided to help them out with their network. So in 2018, we joined the UWIN network, and we have been placing cameras all throughout Rochester. And as you can see here from this map, this is our rough place map. Each dot that you see is a camera that we deploy seasonally around Rochester. And as you can see, there's 3 different colors because I've sectioned the city down into 3 separate areas, which we'll talk about here in a second. And you'll see lines going across those points, and those are transects. So those are our guide points, guidelines for us to stay within 2 kilometers of each of those lines, so that we can keep a nice consistent path of data that we'll be collecting through the city. Also, when choosing these sections of the city and when picking points, we wanted to pick an area that moves from suburban area to an urban area. So not only can we see the differences in different cities across the United States, but in the differences in our own small habitat in Rochester. So north part of the city, we go along the lake. This is one of our northern inhabitants. This is a coyote. We do see coyotes all through the city, so don't think they're only in the north part of the city, but we see a majority of them, and some of the larger ones, more stocky coyotes in the northern part of the city along the lake. If we move on to the next photo, some of the only places where we will have water that rises up high enough under our camera, just out of nowhere. I assure you, 5 days before this photo was taken, this was a dry beach, and now water had risen, and then we got this beautiful mallard in our images. And the north part of the city really is home to most of our turkeys. We have a good amount of turkeys south of the city, but they're outside our study area. So northern part of the city is where we see a majority of the wild turkeys that we do see in the network. And then, yeah, one of my favorites, this is a smaller gray fox. So we've seen gray fox through the city, but some of the more frequent photos we get of gray fox would be in the northern part of our city. And they live right around red fox, and they are the weirdest looking mammals that we have in Rochester. But this is an image of one. And then his counterpart, the red fox, in the exact same tree. Tom, can you go back to that photo before? Give me a little contrast. Yeah, and as you can see, that's the same tree, just a different time. Perfect. So now we're moving towards the center of the city. This area, we were really interested in throwing cameras in this area because it does become tighter with human beings. There's less space for animals to move around. But Rochester being a wonderful city that it is, we do have quite the green space in those areas. So we do find this guy. So we see quite a bit of raccoons. Again, we see them all over the city, but some really healthy looking ones in the middle of the city. Our next animal up that we find center of the city most of the time would be one of my favorites, striped skunk. Always alarming to find one on a photo. Moving forward. And then again, coyotes. This is Mount Hope Cemetery, and we do see a coyote just there all the time. We see it quite often. So they are populated all throughout the city, and they're very good at just not letting people know that they're around. And then Rochester is home to some pretty interesting squirrels. I know we see a lot of squirrels all the time, but they're not to be written off. This is one of our favorites at the zoo. This is an American red squirrel. And you can see it's a red squirrel because of that really red tail and that bright eye band that's around his eye. We are host to many different squirrels in Rochester, and this is among one of them. And then, of course, rabbits. We do find eastern cottontails throughout the city, and this is just a great photo of one right after a rainstorm. So it's a wet rabbit coming out of some brambles. So that's the center of the city. As we move towards the south of the city, in the last year and a half, we've collected lots of data in this area, especially because it is the most parked area, if you will. We have a good amount of parks that go through this transect. We hit some of our bigger ones in Rochester, Genesee Valley Park, High Falls, and a couple of those areas. So this is the one that we thought we would get the most amount of animals, and we're about equal with the northern part of the city. We do see some coyotes here as we move through. They're a little bit more slender on the south side of the city for some reason. It's really interesting, you know, you move an extra 20 miles and you have a completely different looking coyotes. We've seen quite a bit of smaller coyotes towards the south of the city. Oh man, some of our arch nemesises. We have groundhog, Marmota monax. These guys we do see mostly south of the city, probably because we have more fields that we're surveying south of the city as opposed to north of the city. But again, we see them in our backyards. They're everywhere. We know they're here. And then again, skunks. For some reason, we don't see a whole lot of them north of the city, but a whole lot of them south. So this is another striped skunk there with a huge stripe across its back. And then I have to mention, as Annie was mentioning earlier, we have an incredible deer population in Rochester. We see deer on almost every camera we put out, and that's included the real center of the city ones as well. And we've seen deer in the most urban of areas and the most non-urban of areas.
Hey Dave, we have a question about baiting animals in and whether
Yes.
people should do that. And then maybe you can talk about why we see what we see.
Sure. Yeah, we actually do use a lure in the back here, and that's because as an organization dealing with ecological issues, we have been trained to use these lures. It's a very localized tablet. It smells really bad. It smells like gym socks. It's really gross. But it'll bring something in maybe about 100 feet from the tree, not much more than that. We're not bringing something into the park that wouldn't normally be there. We're just making sure they walk in front of our park. I never advise baiting animals, especially because most of the time we do it with a large bunch of apples or something in the woods and then deer come down. So really just letting them be on their own. All this does is it just makes them sniff the tree for a moment and then move on with their life. So we're not feeding them or anything like that. And that's why we're able to use those lures there. This is one of my favorite photos that we've taken in a year and a half. It's gone around the office many, many times. I'm about to print it out and put it on my wall, frame it. This is the largest Virginia opossum I've ever seen in my life, and a very great Rochester native who's really doing well out there, it seems. And again, south of the city.
You know, these have a kind of bad connotation to them, but maybe letting people know why they're so important.
Yeah,
System.
they eat an incredible amount of insects. They don't transmit a whole lot of diseases. They are great controllers of some of the more pesky things that bother us, like ticks and other small insects. So we really like to have Virginia opossums around because they eat a lot of the smaller insects that we don't find desirable after I just give an hour half-hour presentation on a bucket of bugs. So yes. Yes, we love Virginia opossum. If you see one in your garage, just politely ask it to leave, and hopefully it will. As Rochester as a whole, for the whole year, we've had some pretty interesting finds. Some things that I was unaware of before we started the program is how close to the city a lot of our rural wildlife will come. One of those would be this image here. This is a fisher. This was actually found north of the city, close to where I'm from, north of the city. And this guy is very interesting to find in that area. And we've consulted many people about what we found. And a lot of professionals in the field were very interested that we found this where we did, because they're not normally that close to the city. And we're moving on to another photo of a fisher in a different park, very similar area, different park though, about 10 miles apart. And a female, we believe, and the last one was a male. And then we move to another photo, so that means they're moving through the area. That's the same one, just a couple seconds later. So pretty interesting to see multiples in the same season. And then, of course, a mink. So we have a mink. This was actually south of the city. And we know we have mink around here, but I was having a problem capturing them on video or on photo. They just didn't seem to want to get in front of the camera. So this is one of the first images that we had of that mink. And then one thing I like to tell as many people as I can, and a lot of people don't believe me. Even last night on a call that I was on, everyone was saying, where are the flying squirrels? This is a flying squirrel that we have here in Rochester. They are native to Rochester. They've always been here. They're here all the time. They're probably within 10 feet of your house right now. They're out all night as opposed to us being out all day. And they like to live at the tops of tree canopies and eat bird eggs and insects and things. So we never cross them. We live in completely different habitats, even though they live within 10, 15 feet of us at all times, pretty much. So look at the top of the trees. If you're ever by the canal, you'll see them darting from side to side over the canal eating bugs. So that's a good time to find them. And then this photo we just had to throw in here. This is a Cooper's hawk, we believe, or a sharp shin, but we're pretty much leaning towards Cooper's these days. And this is right after it landed on something. It has predated something. It has something in its talons. It's under the leaf litter. We can't see, and then it flies away before our images were able to take another one there. So it's a beautiful shot, and we don't normally get birds of prey in our camera trap photos unless they're in the process of or have already hunted something. So that's one of our Cooper hawk photos there. So the network has really come along. Since we've joined, we've had an additional 11 cities join on since we've hopped on just 2 years ago. We've grown to expand into Canada as well. We're in talks with cities in Mexico, especially before all of this happened, to make sure that we can expand the network as much as possible. We had some pretty big gaps in that map I showed you at the beginning, so we really want to fill in the gaps. We want to get as many different organizations doing this kind of work as we can. Before we joined on, and a couple other organizations, it was very academic. So it was very write a paper, keep the information, 3 years later, put it in a journal, some people see it. What we're doing is we're taking a lot of this information, we're contributing to those papers and that science that they're writing, but also pushing a lot of these photos out to the public. We're really trying to go from a standpoint of education and outreach. And if this is one of the cameras on the tree with our deterrent label on there that says wildlife monitoring in progress, which does actually deter some people from time to time from touching the cameras. And then if we go to the next photo, we've tried to adopt this program to be a classroom-based activity. So we have a 45-minute to hour-long presentation that we do with children in school-age areas. This is a 5th grade in Greece. And what we did was broke them into small groups, and then we had all give them all tablets, and then on those tablets there were 15 photos, and they had to identify those photos using field guides that we gave them and some instruction ahead of time. But it was all self inquiry based, and they had a great time doing it. And we're gonna actually ID later in the program, and you're more than welcome to throw in the chat when we do, one of the photos that they had to ID as a trick photo. So some other beautiful photos are like this coyote photo from north of the city. It's a real white looking coyote, real healthy looking, moving forward. I mean, we have so many squirrel photos. I have thousands of squirrel photos. And this is one of my favorites. He's just coming right up to the camera. And we do get a lot of eastern gray squirrels, quite a bit. It is the top #1 species caught in our cameras. And that's just because they're so active and there's so many of them in the area. And then, of course, raccoons. You know, we have a lot of raccoons in our areas, and we've seen a lot of them that are real healthy. So we haven't seen too many of them that have been sickly looking like a lot of other cities have been finding. And, of course, wild turkey. Had to throw it in. Wonderful photo of a wild turkey. A lot of these guys, we find them, of course, in the mornings, but usually don't see them alone. So this is an interesting photo. And then I want to just remind everyone, we live in a changing climate. So we have lots of photos of different climates, and we actually put them out once every season. We have them out for 4 weeks at a time. So when they're out, we have them out 4 weeks at a time. We do not touch them for 4 weeks, then we take them down and put them up in a new season. So this is one of our winter rounds. And then, of course, we have another fox photo. So as we move forward with these presentations, we want to get them out to more people and get them into more classrooms, and then use these as kind of an ecology-based presentations. One way that we push these photos out to the public, and I'm going to show you that now, is we use a website which is called iNaturalist. And Tom, is that up there? I can't see.
Yep.
Okay, sweet. So we have iNaturalist here. What we see here is our page for iNaturalist for this project. iNaturalist.org is a wonderful website where you can take a photo of any kind of wildlife, plant, animal, put it up there, and then someone online will tell you what you're seeing, which is very helpful in an area like we live here. So on our iNat page, we have taken over 6,000 observations that we've uploaded to iNaturalist. We've actually taken more than probably 16,000, almost 20,000 photos for this program, but we aggregate a lot of those together. We try to make sure that we don't put up a lot of empty photos onto iNaturalist, so we have it down to about 6,000 photos. And then I like to click on the species. You can go into our project page and see everything that we're putting up without making an account or anything. You can just go in and see it. But if you'd like to ID one of our photos, which would be very helpful, I upload them every couple days. I just have a running amount of them because we take so many. I put them up, and then the public actually helps me ID them before we send them off to our academic friends to write papers on. So this here is the page that you can see all the species that we've been finding. And then once you break down the species, you can actually individually pick each of these species to see the photos that are from that species for our project. So you click on the observations tab, and then it actually brings up all of the photos that we've taken of red fox. So this is a great resource to use if you ever see something in the backyard. We've taken a lot of photos of local wildlife, so you can easily match those up to some of the ones that we've been finding. But also a real great resource in general to just put up anything you find. And this is something we'll be using for an event that's happening this weekend, which is called the City Nature Challenge. So it's a very passive event. Event is a big word. It's more of just go out in your backyard this weekend from Friday to Monday, take a photo of something, some kind of wildlife, plant, animal, something, and then upload it to iNaturalist, and it'll just get pushed into our City Naturalist page, or our City Nature Challenge page, and then we'll be able to count that towards how many people we get out and looking for wildlife. We want to stay as safe as possible, so just go in our backyards, look through the cracks in our driveway, that kind of thing, and then see how much wildlife we can find in Rochester this weekend. And then all that can go right on iNaturalist.
Dave, Jen Canders was asking about camera traps that they can use at home.
Yes, please. We actually use, I don't have one within reach. We have cameras that we use that you can buy right at Field and Stream. Ours actually just went out of production, so we're going to have to get the next model up. But our cameras are around 65-ish to 80 bucks. And you guys can get them as low as $20. And I have had them as cheap as $20, and they take great photos. Ours specifically tell you date, time, moon cycle, temperature, those kind of things when it takes the photo. But you know, the more features, the higher the price. The less features, the lower the price. But yeah, they're all a great tool. And our camera technology these days has gotten so well that even the cheap ones take very good photos. So yeah.
What about with quarantine in some of the cities? I know I've been on some of these emails, but I'm sure people would be interested to hear what some of the cities are seeing or thinking around COVID and quarantine.
So the network as a whole has decided to just leave it to individual cities to figure out what their own legalities are of doing something like this. For us, we believe that we're still going to be putting up photos or cameras around the 1st of May. For other cities around the United States, some of our more larger cities like Chicago are really locked down, so they have scaled back the amount of cameras that they're going to be putting up, but still trying to put up those cameras. Some cities have moved a month back, which still would fall into that springtime time period. Some cities have just skipped this time period altogether, and that's completely understandable. So yeah, it's all about which city feels the best. A lot of our West Coast cities are still able to do this, and some of our Midwest cities can, and then some of our larger cities have decided not to. Great. So I actually went out and put a camera at the front of the zoo where we normally put a camera for our camera trap surveying. Right around the time that we normally would have, we've moved our surveying back a month to see what happens. So I put a camera out just to see what was going on. So I'm going to actually show us those images as if I just took it off the tree. Okay. So when I take the, there we go. Oh, it kicked me out.
Sure again.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not going to get the best of us today. All right. So when I take the camera down off a tree, we have a physical SD card, which I have one laying on my desk, of course. And we take that off of the tree, and then we download all the images onto our internal database. And then I look through each one of the images to make sure there's no humans in the images. We put the cameras real low on a tree, facing down, so that if we do catch a human, it's usually just feet, because we care not about what human beings are doing out there. But when we have the photos down, this is kind of a typical image that you'll see. And then I'll just run through them real fast. And you kind of see a mini movie as you go through. And it records date, time at the bottom of the screen, as well as moon, cycle, and temperature. And they're pretty good images. Everything looks great. And as I float through, you can actually get a real good sense of some behavior of some of the animals as they walk through. And then you can see some of the animals are real close to the camera, which makes them very difficult to identify. Also, we've had snow sideways on images. We've had cameras where an animal just kind of laid up next to it, and then we didn't have any photos from it. Here's another one where the deer got too close and it's actually flashing back. So I usually roll through, and there's a raccoon back there. So I roll through and just look for movement, because the camera stays stationary, but the animals move. So if you move back and forth through the images, you can see movement in these images, which makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on out there. And I mentioned sometimes it's real hard to identify what's in the camera images. And I play a game at work when I take these images down, where I call people over to my desk and ask them what's in the photo. So I have one of those photos here. You're more than welcome to throw into the chat if you do see the animal in the middle of this photo. I said in the middle of the photo. Look towards the middle of the photo. We have to look real hard when we look at these photos and not blow past ones that we don't think we have an animal in. So for this one,
I don't know. Nobody's seeing it. Oh, there.
Little yellow bird. Yes, right in the middle. Can you guys see my mouse? I think they can see my mouse. Right in the middle here, we have a very small palm warbler, just moving through the area, coming through. And this guy, yep. Once I point it out, you're like, oh man. And this is what I do at my desk daily, is try to find these very small animals in these pretty interesting images. Yes, and I'm going to go to the next one forward. So you'll see kind of a sense of the movement change. Okay, there's that one. There's this one. There's that one. There's this. So this is the second photo now. Same animal, very hard to see. And they've moved up just a little bit in the photo. So here they are here. So very tough to see. And sometimes you're blasting through photos and you're like, oh, I don't see anything. And then you have to really look. And you're like, oh, that's a mouse or something very small. And then my last palm warbler photo is this blur over to the right side of the screen is actually the bird. It looks like a leaf. It could be anything. That is actually the bird. So a lot of times we have to be real diligent when looking at these photos and be a bit of a detective to figure out what's in them. And now it's your turn to be a detective. Anyone in the chat, this image here I gave to about 70 fifth graders in January. We had about 70 fifth graders tell me what it was, and they were exactly correct. A colleague of mine, Annie, and I were very amazed at all the people that guessed it correctly. And this is mostly what I do. I find an image with something in it and then have to figure out what this animal is. We are looking at a leg. That is true. It is a leg. It is from a mammal. So these happen too, mostly because an animal triggered the photo first, then it waits 30 seconds before it takes another photo. So it triggers the photo, it waits 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden it takes another photo and it's in a weird spot. So that's why we get interesting photos like this. And I am seeing some comments in the chat, and anyone that said back leg of a deer is correct. This is a white-tailed deer leg. And this doesn't seem super exciting, but this is a majority of what we do for this program. And it's a lot of fun, in my opinion, looking at all of these interesting photos. So I have one last thing to show. That same time I put out photos, or I put out cameras rather, we don't normally put a camera on the camera. So, oh, it keeps kicking me out. No, I will conquer it. There we go. Okay, so I have, I put a camera on a camera so that we could see what animals do in front of the camera. So I have two typical videos of what I see in the cameras all the time, and I now get to see them live on video of animals interacting with our cameras. And if you see the squirrel to the right and then one running across the back of the image back there, so that would have triggered one photo. These are 10-second videos, and we take a photo every 30 seconds. So even though two squirrels are running around back there, we would have triggered one photo with that. And most of the time, I have this happen, which is a deer walking behind the camera. I know there's movement because something triggered the camera. I get an empty video or an empty image, and then I just see a deer walking around behind the camera. As you can see back here, the camera is just behind his back leg. So a lot of times we have wildlife trigger the cameras, but then don't walk in front of it. So even with those special lures, we don't normally get all the animals in front of our photos. So does anybody have any questions while you have us about the camera trap program? We will be hopefully putting them up shortly, and then continuing to put them up once per season moving forward. We have shared the link to everybody on here for our iNaturalist page. Also, keep an eye out for the City Nature Challenge. We did pretty well last year, even though it was snowing sideways. And I think we'll do okay this year, even though we're all home. So just look in the backyard, look at a really small space, and try to find that wildlife as best we can. All right. Well, hey, thank you guys very much for joining us for Earth Day today. We have a full line of program. We have one more presentation today. I'm very excited about it. We will be a discussion between our president, Pamela Reed Sanchez, and Drew Lanham about Earth Day today, where we can find hope in nature. So very exciting. And thank you guys very much for joining us for Earth Day to You programming.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.